introduction.
Okay, great. I'll turn it over to you then once we start.
All right, thank you.
All right, good morning, Chair Postman, members, Garrett and Bollendroff, staff and guests. The physical lobby is open, the virtual lobby is open, and we're ready to go.
Morning, thank you. We will convene the Liquor and Cannabis Board Caucus meeting for Tuesday, July 26, 2022. Our first and really only item on our agenda today is a really interesting briefing on the Young Adult Health Survey. And to set that up for us, I will turn it over to Mary Sagawa, our Public Health Education Liaison. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Postman and board members Garrett and Bollendroff. Thank you very much for this opportunity. You probably remember a few weeks ago, we had a presentation on the Washington Healthy Youth Survey, which covered 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. And for today, we're going to look at what we know about young adults and their use of substances. So with us today, we have Dr. Jason Kilmer, and I'll just give you a quick bio about Jason. Dr. Kilmer is an associate professor in psychiatry and behavioral sciences at the University of Washington and serves as an investigator in several studies evaluating prevention and intervention efforts for alcohol, cannabis, and other drug use by college students. In addition to research and teaching, he has worked extensively with college students and student groups around alcohol and other drug prevention programming and presentations throughout his career, including student athletes, a challenging one, fraternity and sorority members, residence life, and first-year students, both at the University of Washington and on over 120 campuses across the nation. Relevant to today's presentation, Jason is the principal investigator of Washington's Young Adult Health Survey, now in its 9th year, in which trends following the implementation of cannabis legalization are being assessed among 18 to 25-year-olds. Jason also serves as the chairperson of Washington State's College Coalition on Substance Misuse, Advocacy, and Prevention. And following legalization, the coalition has worked to ensure campuses are aware of emerging and relevant research. I'm going to add a little bit of personal information in here. I've known Jason for many years. I'm not going to say how many to protect both of us, but it's been such a pleasure to work with him. He is one of a small handful of researchers that have been my go-to people. And part of this is, a major part of this is not only his willingness to always jump on a call and respond, but it's his gift for taking what can be complex research information and distilling it and using it, making it understandable and making it usable for those of us in prevention. He cares deeply about prevention, and this is evidenced by the fact that he was the 2014 recipient of the National Prevention Network's Award of Excellence for outstanding contributions to the field of prevention. And he was also the 2017 recipient of the Washington State Prevention Professional Award of Excellence. So with that, I'll turn it over to our expert, Dr. Kilmer.
What a beautiful introduction, Mary. Thank you for your kind words. I feel like I got nowhere to go but down, so thanks, everybody. It's been the hard part of today, I've been on Zoom for, it'll be 29 months next week, which is stunning. So every time I get to be on not Zoom, I always have to make sure I know how to share my screen properly. I'm going to hopefully do that correctly. I did it. If I've done this right, you see my whole screen. Can someone? Perfect. Great. So I will send a PDF of this so that you have this content. I'm going to dive right into this. You heard Mary say that, of course, there's the Healthy Youth Survey. And we have so many different data sets for adults in general. If you jump back to a few years ago, there was this conversation about what do we know about 18 to 25-year-olds? And arguably, why do we need to know about 18 to 25-year-olds? These are data from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's National Survey on Drug Use and Health. And it's their 2020 data. The age group I tend to work with on college campuses, 18 to 25-year-olds, is the group that reports the most prevalent cannabis use. 12 to 17-year-olds, 10.1% use at least once in the past year. 18 to 25-year-olds, 34.5% use at least once in the past year. 26 and older, 16.3%. Just a couple of things to conclude from this slide. First, I'd like to thank SAMHSA for putting me in an age group with 26-year-olds. Thanks, SAMHSA. Second, the age group that we're talking about today is the group that uses most often. However, the majority do not use. We have decades of research, literally since the 1980s, that show that when people hear or think or believe that, in quotes, everyone uses, they're more likely to start. They're also more likely to have any use that's out there, have that continue, persist, and potentially even be a barrier to someone making a change. If I'm kind of thinking about cutting down or stopping, but I genuinely think most people use, I might be less likely to stop. So we see lots of opportunities to correct misperceived norms, but that involves documenting what are the perceived norms. So the Young Adult Health Survey, we couldn't do what we do without the Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery. It's been funded by DBHR since the start. Sarah Mariani is our main contact at the Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery, and our contract manager is Sandy Salaveras. Our Young Adult Health Survey team is me, Dr. Mary Larimer, Rachel Cooper, Daniela Acuna, and Dr. Isaac Rue. What was the goal? There were conversations happening in Washington after Initiative 502 was passed, with the realization that, wait, wouldn't it be great if we could collect as much data as possible before the first retail store opened in July 2014? So that became our goal. We got 69% of the data collected before the first store opened its doors. And as you recall, it was a slower rollout. The remaining 30.7% we collected into August. Only 18 stores had opened statewide by July. Only 31 had opened by August. So our hope was we got lots of data that could count, in essence, as a pre-time point for the implementation of legalization. Participants were recruited on purpose using a combination of methods. This is not a random sample, and that's by design. At one point, we looked at, could we just get a random sample from the Department of Licensing? The problem is that only gives you people with stable housing, up-to-date licensing information, a license, and, again, who are updating things like addresses. It's always mind-blowing to us when we send out our mailing and we look at how much mail gets returned because of out-of-date info from the Department of Licensing. We used online advertising as well. And what that bought us was the ability to monitor data as they were coming in. And if we were, for example, getting less data from Eastern Washington, we could turn up the dial on placement of ads in Eastern Washington. So that allowed us to modify strategies to recruit samples that were being underrepresented. It is a convenient sample, not a random sample, which, as we've learned, as we've started to disseminate some of this, really has been a strength because it has let us get data from people that otherwise might not have been identified. To be as conservative as possible with the data, to improve generalizability, we weighted the data using census data from Washington State to look at a weighted sample matched on gender, race, and geographic region. What's the good news? Knocking on wood, our weighted results are consistently very similar to the non-weighted. Each year we collect data from a new cohort of 18 to 25-year-olds. We're at the point now where we've collected data on over 16,000 new groups of 18 to 25-year-olds in Washington. And what we've done is every time we bring in a new group, we also the next year collect data on from that group. So each year we follow up with previous cohorts. This summer we launched our 9th year of data collection. The first cohort we met are now 26 to 33-year-olds, or as SAMHSA would call it, people in my age group. So there we go. Dr. Katerina Gutmanova applied for and obtained a secondary data analysis grant. What that has given us is the opportunity to do a deeper dive into this very rich data set. The funding we have from the state, we could not do what we do without them. And most of the dissemination funding is for things like reports to the Washington Healthy Youth Coalition or the State Epidemiological Outcomes Work Group or the Liquor and Cannabis Board. It doesn't necessarily provide funding for the people power needed to get things published. Dr. Gutmanova's grant provided that. And we've all this year already had the opportunity to take a look at what's happened with substance use in general with a paper that Charlie Fleming published, Isaac Rue looked at the cannabis retail outlet density and availability, as well as neighborhood disadvantage status with cannabis use. I'm going to talk briefly about a paper that I was lead author on, where we looked at across the first 6 time points, just shy of 13,000 young adults in Washington. We covaried or tried to control for everything we could. Sex assigned at birth, race, ethnicity, where they were in Washington, age, if they're in a 4-year college or not, full-time employment status, and again, weighted the data. And what we found, I know on Zoom you can see my cursor. If you can see my cursor moving on the screen, what we've seen is a significant increase in a linear trend, a statistically significant increase in any past year use. Next line down is at least monthly use. Next line down is at least weekly use. And the bottom line is at least daily. We've seen in this already at-risk age group, use go up over time. And when we do a deeper dive into the data, it seems to be those with legal access who are driving these significant increases. Those over 21 are driving that significant finding for any past year use. At least monthly use is a significant difference for those over 21. But one of the things that we looked at uniquely was, are people getting addicted? When people ask, wait, can you get addicted to cannabis? Yes, you can. There are clear criteria for cannabis use disorder. The language changed, so it's not new. We used to talk about cannabis dependence, cannabis abuse. In 2013, the terminology changed to cannabis use disorder. 2 or more symptoms meets criteria for a cannabis use disorder, and we found a statistically significant increase in at least 2 past year cannabis use disorder symptoms in our sample. So it wasn't just that more 21-year-olds or more young adults were trying cannabis. It's that more were using frequently, and using in a degree that led to reporting more endorsed symptoms. I'll point out that the DSM-5 criteria came out in 2013. Our data collection started in 2014. So this wasn't a new way of defining it. It was literally more people reporting these symptoms. So what I wanted to do with the time I have today is kind of fill in the blanks since that article. What have trends looked like in the 2 years that followed? You're going to see 3 types of slides. So everywhere you see a circle is where, compared to 2014, before retail stores opened, there's a statistically significant difference when we look across cohorts. Anywhere you see a line, it'll be a significant linear trend. So just overall, what's been the direction? And I hope I'll bring that to life over these slides. So any past year, in quotes, recreational, non-medical, personal use, 2017 and on, the final 5 cohorts were each significantly higher than cohort 1. And there's been a significant linear trend. We've been able to say for years that most young adults in Washington don't report cannabis use. In 2021, that changed. We were over 50%, said at least once in the past year that they reported cannabis use. You can see that when we split the model by those over 21 and under 21, it is absolutely the 21 to 25-year-olds who are driving this. If you look at that last year, this split just widens. And to bring that to life, I made this slide. This slide took an hour to make, so I'm going to leave it up just for a little bit. But notice that in 2014, there was no difference at all. These groups were identical in 2014. This split has very much been driven by the 21 to 25-year-olds. When we look at least monthly, the final 4 cohorts, all significantly higher than cohort 1, you're going to see a theme develop, significant linear trend. And when we do a deeper dive, splitting the model by those over or under 21, it's the 21 to 25-year-olds who have a significant increasing trend. And there's the graph to show you what at least monthly looks like. When we look at least weekly, the final 2 cohorts. So when we looked at our publication, I mean, it was kind of across 18 to 25-year-olds. You know, we saw some changes in weekly. We did see cohort 7 and 8 higher than cohort 1. We saw a significant linear trend. We did see, unique from the time of our publication, was that I believe that's true. I should verify that. But you can see that the significant linear trend for 21 to 25-year-olds was present as well. And there, graphically, you can see what that looks like. This is a lot. I know I have a short time slot, so certainly we'll save time for discussion. When we look at norms, and I mentioned norms earlier, there's a lot going on this slide. but I just will try and bring this to life as best as I can. We asked people, what does the typical person your age in Washington do? What does their cannabis use look like? We see about 2% that say, I think the typical person doesn't use. And minus 2021, that's the right answer. But what we've seen is that a troubling increase in people actually believing the typical person their age uses daily. What's noteworthy is that although 21.62% use at least weekly, meaning most, 78.38% aren't using weekly, it was actually over 68% that thought the typical person their age used weekly or more. Again, we have decades of research that show that misperception matters. It's more associated with people initiating use, increasing existing use, and even using with consequences associated with their use. We ask people where they get it, and this includes only those who report cannabis use. For the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, we've seen a decreasing trend in getting it from friends, and we've seen a decreasing trend in getting it from someone with a medical marijuana card. Where is it going up? Giving money to someone to get it for them, getting it from parents with their permission, and stealing it, which was a new finding, that theft, especially during the last 2 years, you can see it was 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. In 2020 and 2021, we saw reports of theft from retail stores. We do a lot in the state about parent-based opportunities. Start Talking Now, things like this. And I think that making sure that parents are aware of everything from addiction potential to academic outcomes to mental health risks associated with cannabis use, including high potency cannabis use, can be noteworthy. Among the 21 to 25-year-olds, it's going up and getting it from a retail store. You can see how much that leapt and increased once stores, in fact, were open. It's decreasing essentially from all other sources. Driving after cannabis use. The good news is it's declining. We've pointed out that the more unfortunate news is it's still at relatively uncomfortably high levels. But we asked people during the past 30 days, how many times did you drive a car within 3 hours of using cannabis? Those of you that have been around this work for a while might remember that after Initiative 502 was passed, there was only one published study by Grotenherman and colleagues that looked at 5 nanograms of THC per milliliter of blood, which is our state's per se limit. The authors of Initiative 502 cited that article, and Grotenherman and colleagues concluded that it took males, on average, 3 hours to drop below 5 nanograms. The research that's come out since then have said when smoked, people might want to wait 6 to 8 hours. When inhaled, when it's orally ingested, 8 to 12 hours. We saw in 2014, almost half said they drove at least once within 3 hours of use. Fortunately, that's gone down to the point we're sitting at a little over a third that say they've driven at least once. But the good news is there have been declines in driving after marijuana use between cohorts 3 through 8 and cohort 1, as well as a significant linear trend. Medical cannabis, we see no significant differences in any past year use nor overall categories of use, yet perceptions of medical use are increasing significantly, both a linear trend in the past 5 cohorts, higher than cohort 1. Finally, other substances, we see a significant decreasing trend in at least once per year with alcohol, at least monthly alcohol, cigarette use at least once in the past year, pain relievers for non-medical purposes to get high at least once in the past year, and opiates at least once in the past year. That's all going down. Yet, perceived risk is also going down. We keep hearing, in quotes, it's just weed, it's natural, in quotes, it's safer than alcohol, despite science, including the summary report that WSU and UW researchers worked on under the guidance of Bia Carlini, especially with high potency cannabis, but perceived physical and psychological risk of occasional use or regular use. We've seen a significant decreasing linear trend. Dr. Mike Gilson has a paper under revision exploring these findings. Alcohol use, perceived risk of 2 drinks every day is going up, both physical and psychological. And where we've seen no change, because it's always been high, is perceived physical or psychological risk of 5 or more drinks every weekend. So in wrapping up, Wow, my goal is 20 minutes. That was 20 minutes. We'll have our 9th year of data later in 2022, both the new cohorts and the longitudinal follow-up. So if any of that information is useful for the work you're doing, I'm happy to present that. I know we wanted to leave time for questions and discussion. So with that, I'll thank Dustin and Mary for the opportunity to work with you in this invitation today. Our team at the Center for the Study of Health and Risk Behaviors, Sandy and Sarah at DBHR. And we couldn't have done any of this without that contract from DBHR, the secondary data analysis funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. So with that, I will try and figure out how to stop sharing my screen. He says confidently. What does this button do? There we go. I stopped sharing my screen. If time does permit, I'd like to open it up for whatever questions or comments people have.
Absolutely great. Thank you for that. I'll just let you take the questions if you'd like, and from I've got some, but I'll look to my colleagues first. Board members.
I have a couple of questions. So Jason, thank you so much. Really, and Mary, thank you for helping arrange Jason's participation today. Really helpful information, and I'm so glad that we are having these types of discussions with the board. And so I have a number of questions, and I had some questions related to cannabis use disorder versus an increase in use. And I don't know if you guys are doing any research or work following the trends in cannabis use disorder versus an increase in use overall. So there's one question, and I'll stop. I don't know. Do you want me to just stop after each question?
I can just briefly say, as you saw, both of those are going up. So if we saw no increase in use, but an increase in cannabis use disorder, we need to keep in mind that it's prevalence of use. We keep working so hard to get more sophisticated in our data collection. Go back to 10 years ago. The number of reliable, valid measures for cannabis use was really small compared to alcohol. And in fact, a lot of alcohol surveys, they just changed the word alcohol to cannabis and made it a marijuana survey. But, even being able to, someone who uses multiple times per day, who now decreases their use to once per day, surveys that assess daily or more, we don't detect that reduction. So that's why we try and, if all we did was collect cannabis use disorder symptoms or just frequency of use, we don't get to tell the whole story. Because we saw a significant increase in both. It's not only that more people are using, but those that are using more frequently and endorsing more symptoms associated with cannabis use disorder. That's why we become aware of the risks related to addiction.
Great. And are those based on treatment admissions, and are those inpatient or outpatient, or what are those based on?
It's all young adult health survey items.
So
endorsing, it's them endorsing items associated with cannabis use disorder. So the criteria for cannabis use disorder, again, have been in place. So it's their own self-report of, check all that apply, saying this has happened. We've been very careful not to diagnose anyone from a survey. You can't do that. So that's why, as we talked about it, we talk about cannabis use disorder symptomatology. That we can say that's going up. We would not say cannabis use disorder is going up, symptoms associated with cannabis use disorder. And that's because whether it's depression, anxiety, or a substance use issue, we don't diagnose from a survey.
Great.
Yeah, sorry if that was not clear. All of this is based on self-report from 18 to 25-year-olds in Washington.
I have a question related. There's been a decrease in the driving after use. And do you have any idea, what's your hypothesis of why? Is there a campaign that's been effective? What's been effective in decreasing that trend from your perspective?
It's really hard to know. My colleague, Dr. Brittany Hultgren, has a grant looking exactly at that, because she's tried to take a look at driving under the influence of alcohol, of cannabis, of both, and also people's willingness to be a passenger in a car with people who have been using. Her data are coming out as we speak. So a part of me says, I would invite Brittany Hultgren to talk to one of your future meetings to look at that. But obviously the state has done what it can to, around April 20th, have increased DUI patrols. That alone is an education opportunity from a public standpoint. If people are like, why are there increased DUI patrols on April 20th? Well, because driving under the influence is illegal and can be dangerous. Like, it lets people know not to do that. We've heard people subjectively say that as potency has gone up, they've realized, I'm not good to drive right now. We've heard people hypothesize a number of different things, but honestly, Dr. Hultgren's work would be one of those. Stay tuned for a future opportunity for that.
Great. I have two quick follow-up questions.
Sure.
One is related to public information campaigns, if you will. I just got back from New York, and all over the subways there were these, I thought, great public campaigns around the use of cannabis and safe storage, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts about public campaigns like that? How effective are those types of campaigns?
It depends on the type of campaign. You know, there's Mike Graham Squire with Neighborhood House has used data from our Young Adult Health Survey to do a norms campaign in King County. He developed the most steer clear, and that was meant as kind of the wording was for two reasons. Most are choosing to not use young adults in King County, and most aren't driving under the influence. And he's put up on everything from buses to light rail, social norms ads that do two things. They correct the misperceived norm most aren't using, and then they include some public health education. Most aren't driving. In fact, and he has a little point about waiting 6 to 8 hours after inhaling before driving. There's David Hansen in 1982 in the state of New York, where you were, is the first researcher that showed that if we give people facts and knowledge, it doesn't always change behavior. It tends to increase knowledge. Yet, sometimes we need to increase knowledge. We need to let people know what's going on. And so if the goal is let's change behavior through a public health campaign, you need behavior change strategies embedded in that. If your goal is let's increase knowledge, public health works. We know about public health messaging. Scare tactic-y stuff, not so helpful. But if it's fact-based, if there are clear references, if there are QR codes for people to learn more, because there's only so much we can say on a poster, those can all be impactful.
Okay, one final question, and that is related to, let me actually back up and say, I'm so glad you're leading with the information that most young people are not using. I'm really grateful that that message is out there. I think that's super important to continue to emphasize that. So, and one final question, you mentioned funding coming from DBHR to do some of the work. I'm curious about if I were to make available, not myself personally, but if there were money available for small projects, small mini grants, do you think mini grants might be effective in communities across the state, or how might one use mini grants for things like public campaigns or the work that you're doing in that kind of situation?
I mean, the researcher in me says opportunities like mini grants are allow for timely, immediate, emerging issues. You know, the hard part, and I'm with federal funding, you send in a grant, maybe in 6 months you hear how you did. They go, hey, fix this. You try and fix it 6 months later, you stick it back in, and then by the time you get the funding, the issue has passed. So if mini grants are quick turnaround, are data driven, help advance our understanding or the science around an issue, those are incredible. Okay. And I think that those can be very, very valuable. What's cool regionally is that there are, if someone's like, well, I'm not a researcher, but I'd love to know blank, there are researchers in the state that would gladly partner with people. And I think that that's an opportunity. One of the things that I feel like has been cool is looking at ways in which people who collect data are able to, partner with folks in Washington to consider how do we get this out there in the real world. I mean, it was literally 8 years before we saw something wind up in the published literature. It's usually the other way around. With science, we get stuff published and they're like, well, we should probably tell people what we published. This, we were trying to tell people, look what we found, look what we found. And only after Katerina got her grant did we say, now we have the people power to kind of disseminate this elsewhere. Sorry, that was a long answer, but it's an exciting concept that there might be opportunities like this. I think people would be enthusiastic about that.
Great. Thank you so much. I have lots of other things, but I'll follow up with you later with some questions, other things, but thank you so much for coming today.
The main takeaway I got is you got to go to New York. That's pretty awesome. So here we go. Hashtag jealous.
I saw Hugh Jackman too.
What?
I said I saw Hugh Jackman too. That's a whole other story.
For real?
Ooh, cool.
I'd like to now tag over to Jim, who's going to tell us Hugh Jackman's story.
I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I'll tell that story later.
This is Ollie. I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you. That information was very valuable.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a couple of, thank you for the time and we're increasing our knowledge. So that's great. I appreciate you giving us that time. Couple of questions. One of the things that I just tell me what it means that, or why would, on the perception question, where people seem to think in their own cohort, a lot more people are using than report they are using. What is that, why does that happen? And what does that tell you? Is that a concern of kind of cultural acceptance, or what is that?
So the norms field, it was in the 80s that a number of researchers showed that people tend to way overestimate the percentage of people that engage in a behavior, and they believe that those that do it more than they actually do. And it took about a year later, the researchers then showed the more pronounced that misperception was, the more people were to use and use frequently, and again, even use with consequences. The theories about why could be their own presentation. The super simple answer, it's how we work as people. Take it away from substance use. If we're driving on I-5 for 30 minutes and there's no crazy traffic, there's no backup, so apparently it's 2 a.m. But in 30 minutes on the freeway, we'll ask people, what are the cars that you notice? What are the cars that stand out to you? What do people say? The ones blowing by me, the ones weaving in and out of traffic. How many of those do we see in 30 minutes? 5, 6, let's be crazy and say 10. What's the first thing we say when we get out of the car? Everyone drives crazy around here. No one knows how to drive. What's wrong with people? For whatever reason, we don't notice the hundreds doing exactly what we're doing. We don't notice the people going slower than us because they're all behind us. The same thing happens with substance use. It takes one person using in public, and when people smell weed, they're like, well, I forgot, we're in Washington, it's legal here. Or in an apartment building or a residence hall on a college campus, someone's using on the floor, the whole floor smells, people will think, well, I guess everyone's using here. And the fact that it persists, no one's shutting it down. Hey, that person's using in public, why isn't anybody doing anything, could even contribute to permissibility. And so those norms can come from lots of different places. Richard Scribner, who presented years ago for our College Coalition, is a researcher in Louisiana who looked at social norms campaigns on college campuses and showed that overall it didn't work. And some of the campuses were like, but that's not true. We know they worked in our community. So he did a deeper dive into the data. And he coded the communities by their level of, and I quote, wetness. How many within a mile of campus? How many alcohol outlets were there? Signs advertising alcohol? Places where people could drink in public or be seen in public? Outdoor tables, things like that. And what he found was the more competing messages that were pro-alcohol, the less a social norms or prevention program worked. In drier environments, it worked. So what can contribute to perceptions? Billboards, public use, storefronts, signs. I mean, things done visibly and publicly that send a potential mixed message. Like all of that can come into play.
Yeah. Is there, from a public health perspective, any value in normalizing something like cannabis? Is there any kind of set of rules that can, like now alcohol, we know you don't walk down the street and drink out of a bottle.
Right.
Is there any good to come of normalization?
So we talk about norms and destigmatizing very differently. So if there's, normalization, when we talk about norms, it's a majority behavior. And you saw that with every time point, with the exception of yearly use in 2021, most people aren't using. Yearly use is a very broad definition. Most studies look at current use as past 30 days. So no matter the age group, no matter the geographic region, most young adults in Washington State are not using. So what's the norm? Abstinence from use, not using. Normalizing to me means something potentially different. And that's kind of getting that sense of, oh yeah, this is how this works. I think what's been clear is that in the 8 years following the implementation of legalization, and in the 9.5 years since December 6, 2012, it's been so rapidly evolving. The products are evolving, the potency is evolving, laws and rules are evolving. What can be done and not done with advertising is evolving. All of that's changing. And so I do think that there's an almost how do you, in quotes, normalize something that's a moving issue? And
Right.
so I'll stop by just saying what we've learned from the alcohol field is that you can't just do one thing. A mix of strategies becomes important. Yes, prevention's part of it, but there's also policies, enforcement of those policies, education. We heard Jim, when he wouldn't tell the story about Hugh Jackman, talk about seeing education and public health signs. There's prevention, there's intervention, there's treatment. And then for those that are trying to abstain, trying to prevent a relapse, there's recovery support. All of that's important. So it's a big package deal.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't digest all the trend numbers quick enough there, but as we move on, are what you're seeing is, these cohorts that you're tracking now over these period of years, are people just getting more comfortable with the fact that you can go to a store and buy it, where if we checked with them, 4 years ago and they were, just 21, it's new to them. They may not even feel comfortable going to
We've been
stores
collecting
today.
data on cannabis use for over 20 years. Me personally, professionally, I mean, we started getting into this literature a lot in 2005, 2006. In our data, people are we do everything we can to boost the reliability and validity of self-report. Not only is it confidential, not only can they skip any item they don't want to answer, we got a federal certificate of confidentiality, which even protects their data from subpoena. So the good news is we have a lot of faith in people being honest in their data. It depends on the study, but there's other things you can do to kind of boost reliability and validity as well. And the good news, knocking on wood, is that people have historically always been comfortable disclosing in a confidential survey their marijuana use.
Is there work along the lines of what Jim asked about the abuse disorder and people seeking medical treatment for those things? Is there a way to overlay that sort of data with what people are telling you and seeing if it matches?
We could. I mean, obviously, treatment seeking, that would be it's a whole other data set. And that's when we try and look at naturally occurring other data and see how is there a consistent story that evolves. So short answer, absolutely. The long-winded answer is it would be complicated because there are other factors at play. Wow, especially over the last 29 months, about people's ability to even go at one point in 2020 to in-person counseling. So what treatment looks like can vary as well. I mean, there could be outpatient, there could be inpatient. There's a lot of that we could try and take a look at with treatment seeking.
Is there in Washington State a campaign today that just tells people what that disorder is and what those symptoms are? I mean, a self-check kind of campaign?
Not that I know of, and I would defer to all of you if you're aware of one. We years ago, one of our work groups said, "How do we reach people that might not seek treatment? How do we reach pregnant people?" And we did a training where we encouraged use of the Cannabis Use Disorders Identification Test Revised. It's a screening tool. And one of the things we mentioned was if every time you go to a healthcare provider, they screen, that alone is an educational tool. When people are like, why are you asking about this? There's the chance to say, well, it's an addictive substance. And a lot of what people are coming in for, seeking treatment for, could either be caused by or made worse by their cannabis use. I mean, that's an opportunity, but I'm unaware of a campaign that actively looks at raising awareness of that and also raising awareness of withdrawal. I have a colleague that's shown that a lot of the reasons that college students report use of cannabis are actually symptoms of withdrawal. And so we've realized the opportunity to let people know that if a person has a cannabis use disorder, the potential for withdrawal when they stop or make a change in their use is a possibility. I mean, that's a need as well.
Yeah. One last question for me. If you had the opportunity to go seek funding from the legislature and or the LCB in the coming year for a piece of work, what would it be? Is there a new thing you would add to what you do? Is there a complementary study? Or a campaign? What would you do if somebody said we have, I don't know, Jim may have $1 million. I don't know. What would be at the top of your list?
My goodness. You said, what would I do? The first thing I do is I'd say, this is amazing. Thank you. And I'd go to our team. I mean, we have a team that is in our center that is trying to monitor as much of this as possible. We have one person that checks PubMed every day, see if a new articles come out. It's a flaky answer and it's on purpose. We would say, of course, there'd be something we could do. Let's see where we are at that point in time and see what makes the most sense based on what's in the scientific literature, but what our needs are in Washington as well. I will say that I think we've learned a lot more about high potency products and what that means in the last couple of years than we have, period. I think we're getting a lot more sophisticated in our data analysis and data collection. I think we've learned a lot more about mental health associations. There's so much that could be done. So I apologize for the flaky answer, other than to say, I think we would say we'd be thrilled to do something. And here's the 5 things we'd suggest. What would you want to see? And we'd go from there.
Yeah, great. Well, good. No, it's not a flake answer. We definitely have an interest in trying to look at what research is being done, sharing it with people publicly, as you have helped us do today, and seeing what else needs to be done. So I think we'll have some further conversations with you and your team out there about that. And also, I know Jim is working on a briefing for us on our own budget, where the cannabis money goes, what sort of research is being conducted out there, and that also will help us, I think, set a baseline knowledge for people about the amount of work that's happening. So look forward to that. Any
That's
last
awesome.
questions? Jim, you have something?
I have one last question. And Jason, I don't know if this is going to be fair or not, but I'm going to try it anyway. So you brought up high potency a couple of different times. New York Times did a really good article. I thought it was a really good article on, talking about how teens are getting sick from high potency THC levels. Delta 8 has been in the news a lot. And finally, you mentioned mental health and the connection with cannabis and mental health. Can you just give us any last words on those 3 topics quickly as you kind of wrap up here?
Yes, that article was fantastic. It was reprinted by the Seattle Times. You will note that the most cited tool within that article was our state's work group from UW and WSU.
Great work.
We were blown away that it's like, wow, it took 1.5 years for that report to kind of get out there. But the good news, it got out there. Number 2, jinxing nothing, knocking on wood, I'm very superstitious. We added as an item to our young adult health survey, Delta 8 this year. So we can get a sense of, is it as widespread as we're hearing? What in this already at-risk group are we knowing? And my hope is in a couple months, we'll be able to answer that question for you. Third, when we look at mental health, the work group did show that so high potency cannabis, defined in science as anything over 10% THC, the more frequent the use of high potency cannabis, the more it's associated with a range of different mental health concerns. DeForty and colleagues was an article that played prominently in our report, showed that if people use high potency cannabis on a daily basis, anything over 10%, their odds of developing a psychotic disorder go up 4.8 to 5.8 times over people who do not use it all. Research out of Canada showed more associations with mental health across the board. Hines and colleagues in the United Kingdom showed more anxiety with use of high potency cannabis. I guess, and I alluded to this earlier, Dr. Christine Lee in our center asked college students, tell us why you use marijuana. And they said things like, I like getting high, I like the feeling, gives me something to do when I'm bored, helps when my appetite sucks, things like this. We also, they said things though, like when I feel depressed, when I feel anxious, when I have headaches, when I can't sleep. Again, they brought up appetite problems. What are the criteria for cannabis withdrawal? They include depressed mood, anxiety, appetite problems, headaches, and sleep problems. So when people say, well, I know it helps me, how do you know? If they say, I use weed every day. Last week I ran out for 3 days. My anxiety was brutal. Couldn't sleep, felt horrible. Started using again, everything got better. That's not cannabis helping anxiety. That's resuming substance use, making withdrawal symptoms stop.
Yeah.
So part of the associations with mental health were also very clear there. Last thing I'll say, Wayne Hall, in my eyes, one of the biggest experts on cannabis on planet Earth, out of the University of Queensland, showed years ago for our college coalition, a link between being addicted to marijuana, cannabis use disorder, depression, and suicide risk. He said, we do not pretend to think one drives the other, but if one is present, we want to assess the other two. And the most recent national survey of drug use and health, if you look at people with a past year cannabis use disorder compared to people with no past year substance use disorder, there's a 6 times increase in serious thoughts of suicide. There's a 7-time increase, 7-fold increase in reporting they actually attempted suicide. Something's going on with cannabis use disorder, depression, and suicide risk. That was a whirlwind. I hope that answered. I hope I wasn't too long.
That was great. Okay. Thank you so much, Professor. Appreciate it. As soon as you have that Delta 8 data, let us know. I think
I'll gladly come back.
Yeah.
I shared my screen, so I learned I knew how to use this program. So
that's right. Yeah, no, you did very well. I think you have a future in this line of work. Thank you for the time. Thank you for all the info, and please do stay in touch on that. It would be great.
Thank you. Thanks for doing all you do. I wish you a boring and uneventful remainder of your summer, and I'll get out of your way for the rest of your meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, Mary, for helping make that happen. That was terrific.
Thank you, Mary.
And I think we have, more to do. More conversations like this would be great. I would certainly welcome as much as we could. With that, we're to the point of board member and executive assistant reports. Anything to share, board members, today?
Just one quick thing, and I alluded to it in my comments to Jason. I was just in New York, and New York is in the process of setting up their adult use market, and they've done some really nice work. I took some photographs of some of the public campaigns that I saw that I'll be sharing internally, and just thought it was really nice to see what's happening in other states. They have a website that is cannabis.newyork.gov, which was very specific. I went to that site. I think it's very good. So anyway, I thought it was really nice to see what's happening elsewhere, and how it might influence some of the work that we do locally.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'd like to see that too. Appreciate it. Anything, Ollie?
Nope.
Okay. From either. Well, thanks everybody. That was really interesting, and we will adjourn the caucus meeting for July 26, 2022. We'll see you all next week. Have a good week.
Have a great day, everybody.